Welcome to Succeeding Slowly, a practical guide to going indie. My name is Charles Perry, and I'm the owner of Metakite software. I was able to go indie with Metakite software in 2012, and we've had a lot of success with the apps that we have in the App Store in that time. I've actually had apps in the App Store for longer than that, though. I think I put my first app in the App Store in about 2009, so about iOS 2.0 days. So I've been around for a little bit. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Release Notes, which, as the little tagline there says, is a weekly conversation about the business of indie software development. And we have a conference coming up this fall in Indianapolis. We hope that you'll all join us. So you want to go indie? Are you sure? Because it's not really that easy to be indie anymore. I mean, it's a struggle. There's a lot of challenges, and frankly, you're going to be missing out on a lot of the benefits that come with being an employee. You're not going to have a 401k. There's no health insurance. You're certainly not going to get paid vacation. I mentioned the health insurance, right? And you're probably going to make less money than you do as an employee. It's just a fact of life. This is data that was collected about this time last year, and it is data sets that were collected from Mark Warment and from William Wilkinson. The data was actually released as daily revenue figures from their launches of their two apps, Overcast and Manual is the other one. And so what we had going on here is we had this trove of daily revenue data, and so I was able to cross-reference that with some of the historical data from the App Store, particularly the data that has to do with rankings in the top grossing charts. So I cross-referenced that data, plotted it up, and we ended up with two different data sets. We've got the blue data set, which probably looks black to you guys out there in the audience, which is Overcast. We've got the red data set, which is Manual. Along the x-axis, because I know the text is small and hard to read, we have the US top grossing rank with 0 at the origin and 6,000 way over there. And we've got on the y-axis the global daily revenue. So I plotted it all up, took a look at the results, and looking at the data, the first thing that jumps out at you, obviously, is wow. That is one heck of a hockey stick, isn't it? I mean, it jumps way up here. And in sort of analyzing it, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that there is a lot of money being made in the App Store, but not by very many people. Unfortunately, a lot of the money being made is concentrated in the very top of the charts. But that doesn't mean there's no money being made for people like you and me. If you can manage to keep your app in about the top 2,000 rank in top grossing, you can expect to bring down about $100,000 per year. It's not bad money. If you can manage to keep your app in about the top 3,000, you're going to make about $51,000, $52,000 per year, which is about the median income for US households. People live on that. So if we've got all these problems with going indie, if there's no insurance, there's no paid vacation, you're probably going to make less money. Why the heck do you want to go indie? Well, I think I can probably sum that up in one word, and that's freedom. There is just a huge attraction to being able to support yourself from your own work, setting your own priorities. There's a huge attraction to being able to have the freedom to do what you think is most important at any particular time, to setting your own directions and making your own decisions and doing what you think is best for your business. And along with that freedom comes a different kind of freedom. Freedom of time. You're able to do as an indie things that you just can't do as an employee when you're tied to a desk 8 hours a day. You can spend more time with your family, travel the world, maybe get in shape, take up a hobby, or just relax and enjoy life. These are all possibilities when you have the freedom to do what you want with your time. Now, that of course begs a question, if we're all so excited to go indie, what exactly is indie? Because if you ask different people, you're going to get different answers. A lot of people in our community have a pretty straightforward approach to it. If you ask them, they're going to tell you, to be an indie, you've got to have a product. You could be selling to consumers so that you can make money while you're sleeping. Okay, that's one way. And that's the way I've chosen it. I think it's a great path. But I have a little more forgiving definition. Basically, if you can take a nap without having to ask permission, you're an indie in my book. And by opening up the definition a little bit, what that does is it makes a bigger tent. And it brings in people like independent contractors. Heck, indie's in the name, right? Independent contractor. And what you find when you start looking a little harder is that a lot of these groups, like independent contractors, have a lot of the same similarities, with those who are making indie products as well. They have a lot of control over their time. They can take in as much or as little work as they want. When they've decided that they want to take downtime, they can, and they can make choices that they wouldn't otherwise be able to make if they were tied to a desk as an employee. So we're going to talk today about how it is that we can go indie and how we can take that leap to work for ourselves. Now, before I get to the steps, I do need to point out that I'm basing my suggestions today on a few assumptions. No suggestion, no recommendation applies to everyone. I can only work from my experience, and that limits the types of suggestions I'm able to offer. So in coming up with these suggestions, the assumptions I came up with, first of all, are that you're in it for the long term. That you want to build a business that's going to last maybe for the rest of your working life, that you can work at and not have to go back and take a job as an employee. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't go back and take a job as an employee. You might choose to. But hopefully you won't have to. There's a difference there, and I think it's an important one. Next assumption, I'm assuming that you want to keep control of your business, that you don't want to give up control of your business to outside funders, to venture capitalists. Now, there's nothing wrong with venture capital. Venture capital makes a lot of different business models possible that just wouldn't otherwise be feasible. But I don't have any experience with that, and I don't know much of anything at all about venture capital, so my suggestions today really are taking that out of the equation. If you're looking for venture capital, this is probably not the talk for you. My next assumption, that you are comfortable with managing risk, but that you don't necessarily want to eliminate risk. Going indie is a risk. There's no two ways about it. You are trading steady money in a situation that you understand for uncertain money and a work situation that you have no familiarity with. That lack of familiarity brings with it a whole host of risks. Now, I think those risks can be managed. I think that there's the possibility of going about it in a way, a straightforward way, that can minimize those risks and give us all a good chance of doing what we want. But there will still be risk, no doubt about it. Finally, my last assumption is that you have a day job, that you have some sort of money coming in right now, that you can use that money to help build up your savings. You can use that money to help support yourself while you're building up your indie business. So, with that out of the way, and with no further ado, I present to you Going Indie in 6 Easy Steps. Well, obviously not quite so easy. There's a lot of roadblocks in the way, a lot of hurdles, and you're going to find that a lot of these steps are not easy at all. That, in fact, they are quite a struggle, and that you may have to try more than once. Nonetheless, I think that the framework that I'm presenting today, and I'm going to give you a roadmap right here, is one that can reliably get people to the goal that they want to be at. Now, I'm putting this up on the screen up front because I want to give everybody sort of a roadmap of where we're going. We're going to be talking about lots of different things, and it might seem in the middle like we're jumping around a little bit. So I want everyone to know sort of where we're heading. We're going to start by setting a profit target. Then we're going to start saving. We're going to try to come up with a profitable product. There you go. And we're going to execute our plan. We're going to build some momentum. And then finally, when the time is right, we're going to take the leap. And we're going to go indie. So let's start at the beginning. Let's set a profit target. Now, when I say we're setting a profit target, what this really is your replacement income. This is the money that you want to live on a monthly basis. And out of this profit target has to come all of your expenses. You got to keep a food over your head, or a roof over your head. I suppose you could keep food over your head, that'd be sort of messy. Food on the table, you got to pay your bills, and you've got to do all the other things that you're currently doing with your economic life, and you've got to take that out of your monthly profit. Now, obviously when you're setting your profit target, you're not going to create this in a vacuum. You're going to look at what the bills you have now, for instance, and see where you currently stand. You're certainly going to get your spouse or partner involved and talk about what their goals are, what they're comfortable with, and where you can, what kind of profit you think you can live on. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that you're probably going to make less money as an indie. And this is one of the places where that comes in. I am very comfortable with the idea that I am giving up money to gain freedom. I'm essentially buying freedom. I make less money than I could on the open market. but man, do I have a lot more fun, and I enjoy my life a lot more. If that's something that you're comfortable with and your spouse is comfortable with, that may be something you want to consider as well. Now, it might not be, and that's fine too. Everybody is going to be different, and you're going to have to come up with your own conclusions. But as you're going through setting this profit target, there are some things you are definitely going to have to take into account. First of all, you're going to have to look at where you currently stand, what your current obligations are. What are your monthly bills? What's your mortgage? How much you need to eat? Those are some things that probably can't be changed that much. But you also need to look at your future obligations as well. All of us, hopefully, are saving for retirement. That doesn't change when you're an indie. You still need to save for retirement. And that needs to come out of that monthly profit. If you have kids, you might be saving for college. That's another future obligation that needs to come out of that monthly profit target. There might be others as well, but the idea is that all of these different obligations that you have need to be factored into what your profit target is for a monthly basis. Now, when I say profit, I really do mean profit. I don't mean revenue. Profit is money that's left over after you pay all of your other expenses. After Apple takes its 30% cut, after you pay state and federal taxes, after you buy new test equipment, after you pay for a ticket to 360 iDev, all of these types of business expenses have to come out and have to be factored into this profit target. Don't confuse profit with revenue. It will be a very painful lesson, trust me. So at this point, we've got a profit target. We know sort of what we're aiming for. We know what we want to hit on a monthly basis. The next step, we start saving. We save as much money as we can, as quickly as we can. Now, I mentioned that in a lot of cases that, and certainly in my case, that you're going to make less money as an indie, and that your profit target may be lower than the amount of income that you're getting from your day job. If that's the case, start living on your profit target right now, this month. Figure out where that stands. Can you do it? And there's a lot of good reasons to do that. First of all, we're going to be saving a lot more money, because if we start living off of our profit target, we're going to take all of our expenses out of our day job income up to that profit target. Then whatever's left over, it goes in the bank. It becomes part of our nest egg to extend our runway. And all the money that we make from our side business that we're hoping to turn into an indie business, don't spend that either. Put it in the bank. Save it. Don't make the mistake that I and so many others did. One of the reasons why we're saving this money is to smooth that transition between employee to indie. If you are spending that money, you are living high on the hog, man. It is good times. Then you quit your job, and all of a sudden your income has been cut in half. That is financially traumatic. And by saving as much as we can, and by not getting used to living off of so much money, we're able to sort of smooth that transition. And trust me, it's a much better way of going about it. But the other reason why we're saving all this money is because we want to figure out how good our profit target actually is. Is it accurate? Can we live off of that? We may find that our profit target is too low and that we need to adjust it up. That's going to have an impact on our ability to go indie. Or we may find that we're okay with where we are. We might actually be able to adjust our spending even further and bring down our profit target. That's great too. That's going to give us the ability to go indie sooner. But we need to get a feeling for how accurate our profit target is so that we can make adjustments if needed. So we've got our profit target out of the way. We sort of know where we're heading. We started saving aggressively. Now it's time to conceive a product. Easier said than done, right? This is the part that is going to be aimed primarily at product people. It doesn't apply so much to the independent contractors out there, because you independent contractors, you are the product, right? You're selling your time, you're selling your expertise, and you're trading your time in exchange for the customer's money, and that's fantastic. But the product people have a slightly different situation. They have a different problem to tackle. They've got to find a problem that's painful to enough people that they can provide a solution to, so that they can receive money in return. And as we all know, especially in iOS and the mobile sphere, that's becoming harder and harder. You might recognize this slide. This is from Josh Michael's keynote on Monday, and he was kind enough to let me put it into my presentation. In his talk, he talked a lot about sort of the phases of a market growth. You start in the early market, you move on to a sort of a growth market, and then you end up in the mature market. In his talk, he pointed out that when you look at the sort of apps that dominate the App Store over these three phases, and I think it's probably a lot of people agree that we're sort of entering into a mature phase of the App Store market. that different types of apps dominated the market at those different times. You know, in the early days, we had a lot of indie hits. You know, we had Trism, we had iShoot, we had some other standout indie apps, and you know, they were. It was much easier to make a living on the App Store then. We moved into the sort of growth phase, and you start to see more of a mix between indie and more established firms. You see some like Nimblebits games that were quite successful on the indie side, and then you have things like Angry Birds, which were clearly backed by venture capital money. Today we are or at least entering the mature market stage, and you see the charts dominated almost entirely by big companies, by Disney, by EA, by venture-backed companies, and there's a lot harder to find indies. And so from this information, Josh concluded that indie lost. And I disagree, or respectfully disagree. I agree with his conclusions, or I agree with his conclusions of how the market shaked out, but I disagree with his conclusion of where indie is heading. Because I don't think indie lost. I think indie just failed to adapt. I think a lot of indies out here are stuck in this early market mentality. And that a lot of us are stuck with the mentality that we can make an app in 2 or 4 or 6 weeks, throw it up on the App Store, get a big spike of sales, and sort of ride that curve down until we have time in another 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, throw another app up there and get a big spike of income and ride that down. And that cycle just sort of continues like a merry-go-round until it doesn't. When we put out that app and it fails to spike, we don't get the revenue expected, what do? There's no slide to work our way down. There's no income to support us for the next app. We're not in the early market anymore, and we need to stop thinking like we are. We're in a mature market now, and we need to think like a mature business. We need to look at what goes into a business. We need to look at market. We need to look at marketing. We need to do all the things that real businesses do. Because if we're going to be in this for the long term, if we're going to be able to stay indie for the rest of our working life, that's what it's going to take. So what do we build? Easy enough. We build a business, right? We go in and we look at the stuff that we need in order to, jumped ahead there. We look at the things that we need in order to be able to support ourselves for the long term. I was reading a book recently called Start Small, Stay Small, A Developer's Guide to Launching a Startup. And it's by a gentleman named Rob Walling. It is a great book. I suggest everyone go out and read it. It's very thin. It's not going to take you that long to read. Now, the book itself is actually geared towards software as a service developers, but a lot of the suggestions that he has in this book are equally applicable to both desktop and mobile. And I got a lot out of it. I think you would as well. But one of the things he does in this book is he identifies that there are four factors that really contribute to the success of a software business. And they are market. Who are we selling to? How willing are they to give us their money? How much competition is there? Marketing. How able are we to get our message out in front of our target market and convince them to give us their money? I think a lot of indies are sort of allergic to marketing. It's not really something we want to even think about. But if we're going to be a business, we have to do business-like things. We need to get out and communicate to our customers the value that we're providing to convince them to pay for it. We need to find where they're hanging out, whether it be in real life or online. We need to go to their message boards. We need to go to their blogs. We need to go to their conventions. We need to go to their magazines. We need to go to their newsletters and get our information out in front of them. Aesthetics. How pretty is our app? How well does it fit into the rest of the overall ecosystem? Does it look like it's an app that belongs on iOS? Finally, functionality. What does your app do? How well does it do it? This is the nuts and bolts that we as developers are really probably most comfortable with. And so Rob Walling identified these 4 factors that contribute to the success of a startup business or a software business: market, marketing, aesthetics, and functionality. But Rob Walling's key insight wasn't that there are 4 different success factors. His key insight was that these 4 success factors contribute unequally to our success. In fact, market, more than any other factor, is going to give us the best chance of success as an indie, if we really concentrate on that. And so since market is the most important success factor, that's what we should really be looking at when we're trying to decide what to build. We need to look at the groups that we can possibly sell to and choose our customer. Do we really want to sell to people who are only willing to spend 99 cents on an app? Why not find a group that has a real problem, has real money, and is willing to spend that money to solve that problem? Why not find a group that's willing to pay $10 for an app, $20 for an app, $50, $100 for an app? There are groups out there. If you're shaking your head and saying, no, those people don't exist on iOS, you are dead wrong. Any business that has profit is interested in spending money to solve problems. And there's a lot of individuals out there that are willing to spend money as well. Your problem as a developer is to find out who they are, where they are, and how to reach them. So what we're going to do when we're trying to decide what to build is we're going to look at these success factors. And we're going to start with what's most important. We're going to start with the market and choose the market that we want to sell to. Then we're going to evaluate how can we reach them. Can we reach them? Do they hang out in one place? Do they aggregate anywhere where we can reach out to them and get our message out to them? Once we've come up with some markets that we think are reasonable, now we can go ahead and move on to the other ones. Move on to aesthetics and functionality. Figure out what problems they have that need solved. Figure out what features need to be involved in an app to solve their problem. Can you do it in a nice way? Go find a designer. You don't want to draw the pictures yourself, right? And we're going to come up with a couple different ideas here, concentrating on what's most important. And once we get a list of different ideas that we think might be profitable, then of course, we have to evaluate them. I was reading another book recently as well. It's called The Personal MBA. And it's by a guy named Josh Kaufman. It's another great book. It is not a small book. It's a very big book, but it's a good book. And in it, he sort of spelled out actually he had 10, but one of them doesn't apply very well to software. So 9 different criteria that we can use to evaluate markets and products. And I thought they were a great way of going about thinking and evaluating what kind of products we want to build. So I stole them. And one of the ones that he really thought was important, and I agree is important, is urgency. The question is, how badly does the person that you're selling to need a solution to their problem? Do they need it right now? Do they need it really, really badly? If they need it right now and really badly, the chances that you're going to be able to sell a product to them is probably pretty high. It's also a pretty good chance that you're going to be able to convince them to part with more money than they otherwise might want to part with. In addition to urgency, we also have market size. How large is the market that we're selling to? Now, this one actually cuts both ways for indies. Because when you're thinking about market size, the most obvious thing is that the market size is going to be at least a cap on how much money you can possibly make from a product. I mean, when you run out of people to sell to, you can't get any more money from them. But the reason it cuts the other way is that if you have a market that's too big, if you're selling into a mass audience, a mass market, you might start to attract the attention of sharks. And you might find the Adobes and the Microsofts and the Apples of the world circling around, trying to eat your lunch. And so frankly, as an indie, you're actually better off if you don't head towards the mass market. I think you're actually better off if you head towards a niche. Find a niche that is large enough to support a software business, but is small enough that the big players, frankly, aren't going to be interested. If they can only make $250,000 in profit off this niche, Adobe's not going to care about it. That's a great number for me, though, let me tell you. And so go out and evaluate your ideas based off of the market size as well. Another thing to consider is pricing potential. Oh, it just jumped to. There we go. Pricing potential. And what that boils down to is how much money are you likely to be able to convince your customer to pay for the solution to your problem. We're all familiar with the race to the bottom. We're all familiar with the land of 99-cent apps. But there are people out there who will pay more for the right solution to a problem that they have. Your job is to find a problem in a market where they're willing to spend more money than is normal, because those are the customers you really want. Another thing to consider, the cost of customer acquisition. Hopefully we're not going to be out on a street corner spinning signs like this guy is, but it does cost money to attract the attention of customers and to attract customers. And that cost is going to come in 2 different forms, time and money. Now, most of the cost of customer acquisition that we're probably familiar with and thinking of is going to be money, right? It costs money to advertise in message boards, in blogs, in newspapers, in magazines, in newsletters for different occupations. That all costs money. But there are free options that are available. Becoming a respected member of the community is a great way to attract customers. If there are message boards out there that deal with your particular market, go join them. But it costs time to establish yourself as a member of that community. It costs time to become recognized as an expert. And that's time that needs to be factored into your cost of customer acquisition. Another thing to consider when evaluating a product idea, how unique is it? Are there things in there that are different than your competitors, or is it the same old, same old? We mentioned before that about the race to the bottom and the problem of trying to get more than 99 cents out of an app, or sometimes even free. But the reason that happened is because there was a lot of undifferentiated apps out there. There are a lot of apps out there that do exactly the same thing as the other apps out there. And when that happens, your app becomes a commodity. And unfortunately, the cost of commodities has a natural tendency to drop to the marginal cost of reproduction. Software doesn't cost money to reproduce. And so software that's not differentiated, that's a commodity, has a tendency to have its price drop to zero because that's what customers expect. But if you can find a differentiator, if you can find something that's unique about your product and that people are willing to pay for, now all of a sudden you're not a commodity. Now all of a sudden you can demand a higher price point. You can demand that people pay more than free or 99 cents for your app. But then you've also got to look at how difficult it is for others to reproduce that unique feature of your app. Because if there's not some sort of barrier to entry, if someone can copy your differentiator overnight, you're not going to be unique for long. So you need to look at what sorts of barriers to entry there are to competitors. Is there IP, intellectual property, that you can make use of in order to legally create a barrier? Are there ways, or is there hard technical barriers that would have to be overcome in order for a competitor to come in and recreate your differentiator? If there are, that's great. You want something that's going to prevent your competitors from coming in and basically copying your app. Another thing to consider, if it advances, there we go, is speed to market. How quickly can you get your app and get it into the marketplace? Obviously, the faster you can get your app on the App Store, the sooner you can start making profit. And profit is a wonderful thing. So in general, if you can have an app that's going to be, that you can get to market quickly, that's something that argues in favor of that particular product. How much upfront investment is required to create your app? Now, there's different types of upfront investment, and frankly, in software, it's not like we're creating manufacturing plants. We're not building factories here. So, traditionally in software, the upfront investment is generally pretty low. But sometimes there are upfront investments that need to be made. Maybe you need to go to a class and receive training and become an expert in a particular topic so that you can create a product to suit the needs of that market. That's an upfront investment of time and energy and money. And there's other types as well. In general, you're looking for a product that has low upfront investment. Unless, of course, that upfront investment creates a barrier to entry, which we just spoke about earlier, in which case, it might be a good thing. Upsell potential. What kind of opportunities are there to sell more or different things to your already existing customers? Can you sell them in-app purchase? Can you bundle one app with another app in the App Store and sell them more than one product at once? In general, you want to come up with a way to get money from your customers on an ongoing basis. And if you can find a way to do that, that's an argument in favor of the product idea that you're considering. Finally, evergreen potential. How much time and effort does it take in order to be able to sell this app on an ongoing basis? To give you an example, let's consider an app for, since I'm from Indianapolis, the NCAA finals, which are held in Indianapolis on a periodic basis. If I'm making an app for the NCAA finals, I've got all kinds of stuff that's in there. I've got teams, I've got statistics, I've got local information. But what happens next year when it's different teams or it's being held in a different place? Well, I've got to go through effort to get that app updated with the new information. That costs time and money. So if there's ongoing effort that's required in order to keep your app sellable, that's something that you need to think about. Now, that's not to say that requiring time and effort on an ongoing basis is bad. It's just something to take into account. You certainly don't want something that you're going to have to basically rewrite from scratch every single year. You want something that you're going to be able to maintain and be able to take into the future. So there's your photo shot opportunity. Those are the 9 different qualities and criteria that you should probably look at. These are from the Personal MBA. If you have a chance, I'd look it up. But those are at least 9 things to consider as you're evaluating an app idea. So we've gone to the trouble of finding the market we want and deciding that whether or not we can reach them. We've come up with some product ideas. We've narrowed that down using these 9 criteria. We now have a product idea that we want to build. And so, it's time to execute. And we've got to execute at a high level. We've got to nail marketing, we've got to nail aesthetics, we've got to nail functionality, and we've got to put a product out there that's worth buying. We've got to launch our app, we've got to work our marketing plan. Yes, you need a marketing plan, and no, it probably doesn't involve the App Store. But you've got to get the message out there, you've got to convince people to buy. And then after you execute, now it's time to start building some momentum. And here's where it starts getting interesting, because hopefully we're going to have some revenue coming in, and with that means we've got to start keeping some books. We've got to track our income, we've got to track our expenses, we've got to track our profit, because if you don't know what those figures are, you have no idea whether you're ready to go indie or not. So you've got to keep some good books. You've also got to keep saving. You know, the goal here is to build up a runway so that you'll have a safety net when you finally go indie. You've got to evaluate your work. You've got to take a look at your app. You've got to look at your marketing plan. You've got to look at your launch. You've got to see how you did. If there are places where you can make improvements, make them so that you can make use of those improvements next time, or maybe in the present for the current app. And then we've got to iterate. You've got to take a look at where you stand. You've got to make some decisions based on the evaluations you did earlier. Is this a product that's worth continuing to pursue? If it is, decide what to add, what features to add next. Decide how you're going to add more value for your customers, how you're going to make your app more attractive to your market. Make those changes and iterate on your app. If, however, you decide as part of your evaluation that the app is not worth pursuing, that it was a flop, you were wrong in some fundamental way, and it's time to look at something new, do that too. Go back to the beginning. Start brainstorming more ideas. Find a new market, or the same market. Find a new idea. Execute on it. And then come back and evaluate it again. And then once we've done that, then finally, when the time is right, it's time to take the leap. But how do you know when to take the leap? And so it's a really tough question, honestly, because it's going to be different for every person. It's going to depend on your risk tolerance. It's going to depend on how you did, what your profit targets are. It's going to depend on lots of different factors. So let's walk through an example so we can see sort of how you might make that decision of when it's time to go indie. What we have here is a scenario where a person has a day job, and this person makes $110,000 per year. That, of course, is before taxes. After taxes, he brings back $6,548 per month. After talking with his wife or her husband, they come to the decision that they need a profit target of approximately $75,000 per year in order to maintain the lifestyle that they want, which comes to $6,250 per month. Now, here's one of the interesting things we haven't really talked about, which is time frame. Now, in this case, this person decides that they have an 8-month time frame. Now, what this is, it's really, basically it's a measure of the risk tolerance that you have. And because what this time frame means is that this person is determined that they're going to hit their profit target over an 8-month average before they go indie. That's going to be their clue that it's time to take that leap. That number is going to be different for every person. Personally, I think 8 months is recklessly small. I think 12 months is much more reasonable. I, however, and my wife in particular, is fairly conservative. We worked on something closer to 18 months. But it's going to differ for everybody. You're going to have to make a decision for yourself when you think you're going to feel comfortable in finally, quitting your job and cutting that stream of income. So let's take a look how this all plays out. Month 1, we have some things that are going to be happening. First of all, he's still working in his day job, right? So he has a monthly income that's coming in. And if you'll recall, he's making actually more in income than his profit target is. So we can see that he is living off of the first $6,250 of his pay and has $298 left over from his income. And he has some his app money that's coming in, and in this case, he makes $4,776 that month. That's pretty darn good. And so he's going to take that money, and he's going to save it. Next month, month 2, again, he has money coming in from his day job, another $900 or about $300. He has money coming in from his side business, not quite as good this month, $3,800, and he's going to save it. Month 3, and again, he has money coming in from his side business or from his income. He has money coming in from a side business. And again, he's going to save it. Now, I'm not going to click through that slowly, but the point is we're going to do this month after month after month. And we're going to continue to save the excess income that is above our profit target. We're going to continue to save any money that comes in from our side business, and we're going to keep socking that away. And in the process, we're building our nest egg, we're extending our runway, and we're going to continue doing this until we hit a particular milestone. And that milestone, the first one, in this case, is going to be month 8. Because remember, our time frame is 8 months. So at 8 months, we have a decision to make, at least some evaluations to make, because we need to look at our 8-month rolling average. We need to see how we've done over that 8 months. Have we hit our profit target? In this case, no, we haven't. We have 57.29 there. Our profit target is 62.50. We have some more work to do. And so we're going to get back to work, and we're going to continue this process, saving our money, evaluating at the end of each month how we're doing, and comparing that to our profit target. And eventually, we're going to hopefully get to the point where we have exceeded that. We just haven't yet. Until all of a sudden, we do. And when we get to the point where our 8-month rolling average meets or exceeds our profit target, that was our tip-off, remember? When we set that 8-month average, we essentially made a contract with ourselves that this is the evidence that I need to know that I have a chance of being successful. I've just met that. And so now I have the opportunity to go in, quit my day job, and go indie full-time and devote my full time and effort to what was my side job and is now my real job. Let's take a look at what happens at the end of this process, because we had a lot of stuff going on there, and for a lot of the time, all we were doing was saving money. So what we have at the end of this, first of all, we have history, and it's a good history, because we now have a track record of success. We have shown that we can at least have an 8-month track record of success that says that we can meet the needs of our family, and particularly the financial needs of our family, and be able to keep our family in a secure situation. We also have savings, and in fact, we have a lot of savings. We have over $74,000 in savings in this example. That's quite a bit of money, and it creates quite a bit of runway. In fact, if we don't get any profit at all, zero profit, we have enough runway to keep it going for 12 months, a full year. Now, think about it though. If we've gone this long showing a track record of success, what's really the likelihood that we're going to jump from the profit we want immediately down to zero? Probably not that great. A more likely outcome, I think, is that instead of having our profit drop to zero, that in fact we'll just not quite meet our target. So let's assume a bad situation that we only hit 50% of our profit target from now on. If that's the case, we still have 2 years of runway. That's 2 years that you can get your house back in order, figure out what's going wrong with your app and your business, and get that fixed. Worst case scenario, and this is mathematically speaking, if you figure this at a very bare minimum, you're at least going to end up with 8 months of runway. 8 months, of course, because that's what your time frame is. If your time frame is longer, you're going to have a longer guaranteed runway. So that is sort of my suggestion for a systematic way of how you can, sort of take that leap and go and get the indie job that you've always wanted. It's going to be hard. There's no doubt about it. But I think it can work, especially if you are wise about the decisions you make when you're deciding on what sort of business you want to build. And remember, you are building a business. You're not building an app. You need to look at the market that you want to target and make sure that they're a market that's willing to pay for the value that you provide. And if you go through this process and evaluate all of these things, I think you really do have a chance of reaching your goal of going indie. And that you soon will find that your fortune has changed, that you'll be able to quit your job, go indie, and enjoy the freedom that we all want. Thank you very much for your time. Now, I think we do have a few minutes for questions, so if anyone has one, I'll entertain them. Yes, sir? Okay, the 2 books I mentioned. The first one is the smaller book, and it is Start Small, Stay Small, A Developer's Guide to Launching a Startup. And here's the important part. His name is Rob Walling. He's only got one book, so if you look him up, you'll find it. The other book is called The Personal MBA, and it's by a gentleman named Josh Kaufman. It's Kaufman, maybe one F, maybe two, I'm not sure, but Josh Kaufman. Both are really good. Obviously, the first one is geared more towards software. The second one is more business related in general, and the second one is much bigger, much drier. So, yeah, choose accordingly.
So, I guess a lot of people kind of anticipate that initially when they put a product out there, it's going to be, they'll have at least an initial bump in sales.
Mm-hmm.
Is that real, or is it really people kind of just discovering it over time?
I think it can actually be both, if that makes sense. I think the spike you see, I think in a lot of cases really is real. I think that too many people have experienced it for not to be real. The thing is, you don't want that to be what you rely on, if that makes sense. I think you can have both. I think you can have an initial spike of interest. Now, I think my wife has a fond way of saying that boring apps make money, and so I do productivity apps. I'm about to release a new app for geared towards CPAs and tax preparers. It's probably not anything that someone in our community will be buying, and so we need to talk later then. Yeah, you're my market. But anyways, the point is that we see a lot of traffic on the same blogs and stuff like that, and as a result, I think software that is geared towards apps that are geared towards a mass market or geared towards a really vocal online market have a tendency to see that spike more than other groups. I'm not expecting a huge spike from that kind of thing when I launch my new app. I am hoping to get a big spike from my marketing effort, but I don't think I will see any spike at all from people in our community buying my app. So I think you can see that spike, but then the goal after that spike, though, is a slow burn. You want to see growth, right? And you can have growth. As word of mouth spreads and as your marketing message improves, you should see hopefully growth year after year in your market. So, did I answer your question or no?
You did.
Okay, Mr. Showquist.
I know a lot of this, but could you maybe explain, like, when you cut the cord and you talk about your runway and just no particular numbers, but just whether it went up or down for a while, just so people have a feel.
Oh, so my experience of. Well, I need to start by clarifying that this is not the method I follow. This is a method I wish I had followed. This comes from a lot of unfortunate and sometimes painful personal experience. I, for instance, didn't do the whole saving thing that I should have, and now in hindsight I wish I had. And so I went through that trauma of cutting my income in half. That was not pleasant. It worked out in the end. I managed to make it through that misstep, but it was not happy. I think as an indie you should have reasonable expectations of having good times and bad. You're going to see both. There's no doubt about it. When you finally are able to quit your job and run your own business, whether that is product or whether that's contracting, you are going to be on a super high, right? Because you can take on the world. You've achieved your dreams. Life is good. And then after a couple of weeks, things sort of settle down. It's like, oh man, I've got a lot to do. And the reality is that being indie is a lot of too much to do and too little manpower to do it. So there's, if you end up going this road, I suggest that you, take that into account and hopefully find people that are like-minded and have support that you can talk to and stuff like that. But there will be good financial years. There will be bad financial years. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that I think a lot of people this year in particular are finding that sales are down. I've talked to a lot of indies that are finding themselves in that group. Even indies that are doing it all right, I think they're finding that the sales are down. I am lucky that, and I say lucky because mine are not down. They're not that up either, though. They're sort of flattish. But I'm in a better situation than a lot of the people I've talked to. And that, I don't credit that necessarily to anything that I'm doing particularly well. I think that is, in large part, a side effect of the market that I'm selling to and some decisions that I made early on. Not necessarily that I'm an expert marketer or anything like that. It's just the way things rolled out this year. Yes, sir?
You mentioned about marketing outside of the App Store.
Yes.
Obviously, it varies from case to case, but can you give a specific example of a marketing effort that really worked well for you?
I can give you a moderate success and I can tell you what I'm going to do and that I have hopes for. To give you an idea of what I did in the past and what I plan to do in the future. My first app was my current app is an app called Benjamin for those who follow a system called the Franklin Planner, Franklin Covey productivity system. It's very popular in the corporate world. It's great. My first app, however, was for an app called Actionless that was meant for those who followed a system called Getting Things Done, or GTD. And early on, I was able to get, and this is, again, in the early App Store days when it was easier to get attention in some of these cases, I was able to get the attention of the GTD folks. And I was able to get a little bit of organic news on their website and on their blog. And they did a story about me and my app, and that got a lot of attention. Not because I'm particularly interesting, but because I was able to get my message in front of the people who were really looking for a product, and that was great. Now, I can tell you that I mentioned I was making an app for a CPA, and I was very conscious this time. I waited a long time until I found the right app. I found a market that's willing to pay for the value I'm about to provide, I hope. I have a problem they have that's very painful that I think I can provide real value and provide a solution for. And most importantly, I can reach them. The problem I found with my Franklin Planner group, with the app I have now, is that they're sort of scattershot. They don't really congregate anywhere, and that was a failing in my, back then. I'm getting better as I go, I'd like to think. And so one of my mistakes is that when I chose a market for Benjamin, it was hard to reach these guys. But the tax guys, there are lots of professional societies. They read the same blogs. There are newsletters that go out. There are lots of ways to reach this group. And that was one of the really big things that I had on my checklist of what I was looking for before I started a new app. And so I've been in touch with some professional associations that have to do with tax preparers. I'm planning to do some advertising in their newsletters. They as one of their services they provide to advertisers, they will do mass mailings to their providers, so I can get my message out that way. As small businesses are starting to make their plans for the busy tax season that's coming up in 2016, I have opportunities to do that, and that's just one example. And that's happens to have to deal with an occupation, but let's say you want to do one for bird watchers, right? There are conventions of bird watchers. Go to those conventions. Bird Watchers of Indiana have newsletters. The Audubon Society of Indiana. Get in their newsletter. Give them a story. Buy a real honest-to-God ad. A lot of people will talk about Google ads. I've heard mixed things about those. Some people say they work, some people say they don't. So I have mixed feelings about that. I don't have any personal experience with that, but I plan to experiment with them. But I plan to experiment and keep a close eye on it and evaluate as I go and decide whether it's actually worthwhile or not. So that's something that's, I think, still up in the air. Yes, sir?
Are you going to do anything different in your CPA app, kind of collect customer information?
I am, as a matter of fact. That's a good point. And one of my goals with this is to come up with a way that my users aren't anonymous to me, that I'm actually engineering the pricing structure so that I can use subscriptions, so that they can create accounts, so that I can get contact information, so that I can sell to them again and suggest they renew their subscriptions and things like that. But I think we're out of time. Thank you guys very much. Good luck, everybody.